Welcome to episode 713 of the Entertainment 2.0 podcast, brought to you by thedigitalmediazone.com. I'm Josh Pollard, and this is the show that puts you in control of your favorite movies, music, shows, and games. That's right, it's a solo episode for me this week. My life has continued to be a little bit nuts, and unfortunately it's conflicting with Richard's life this week, so just me this week, but wanted to make sure we got something out because there's been a lot of news, and I can tell you there likely won't be a show next week and didn't want you all to keep waiting for more. So let's jump into it. And as we love to do, we're going to start with some listener feedback. And this time, this was sent into our inboxes. Entertainment20 at thedigitalmediazone.com is the email address. And this week, we got a message from longtime friend of the show who's a little bit behind, but he has some really excellent information to share with everybody on a topic we talked about quite a few episodes ago. So Kevin says, as always, loved the show, although I might ask if Richard can tone down his enthusiasm during the gaming segments. Love you, Kevin. So Kevin goes on, I'm getting caught up on past episodes. I just listened to Entertainment 2.0, numbers 697 and 698, and there was a listener question on backing up media files, which had me reflecting back on the home server show days. Wow, that's a really long time ago, Kevin. He says, nice review on the 3-2-1 backup strategy that we talked through there. He says, the listener feedback on storing drives at the bank in a safe deposit box as an offsite backup is not often considered. He says, although fireproof, bank vaults are not always climate controlled. Josh mentioned storing drives in a fire safe. Perhaps this was covered on another show. It wasn't. But traditional document fire safes are not suitable for hard drives and media. This is the part that I didn't know, guys. So this is Kevin filling in with all of the really useful information, saving your data for you. So Kevin says traditional fire safes will keep internal temperatures below the burning point of paper, which is 451 degrees Fahrenheit, but it will not protect drives, media, or electronics in general. There is a standard UL case 125 3-hour that claims to keep internal temperatures below 125 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 hours when the safe is exposed to a fire as high as 1,925 degrees Fahrenheit. But those safes seem to start around $2,000. In general, the average maximum short-term storage temperature for various media devices are as follows. Hard drives, 150 degrees. SSD, 185, USB drives, 160, DVDs, 125, Blu-ray, 100, CDs, 90. He says, I'm still using an original IO-safe, fireproof, waterproof NAS for content that cannot be replaced. I also have an offsite backup at a property we own about an hour from home. Gigabit Ethernet in rural Wisconsin is a wonderful thing. I appreciate you guys. Kevin, we appreciate you. I learned so much from your message, and I am thrilled to get to share it with the rest of this community. This is one of the things that I absolutely love the most about doing this show is the community that we've built up and how you all show up time and time again to help each other out with really, really great information. So listen to Kevin. Don't listen to me. Don't just throw a hard drive in a random document fire safe that you bought at Costco. It will not save your hard drive if your house burns down. So thank you so much, Kevin. And hopefully we will hear from more of you in the future. But for now, let's jump into the topics for this week. And I gotta say, it's almost all bad news. There's really only one good story, I guess. You know, we'll start there. So we're going to go a little bit out of order. We normally hit the video news first, but we're going to start with the audio news because that is the one piece of good news. And that is a new product that's not at a ridiculous price. And that new product is the new Google Home speaker. You might be wondering, Josh, Google has had lots of home speakers. What one do you mean? And I will repeat, I mean the Google Home speaker. That is what they're calling this new device. Very simple, very generic name. The Nest branding is gone. The Google Home branding is kind of back. So here you go. You've got the new Google Home speaker. And if you're familiar with the various Google smart speakers over the years, then I would say that this one, in terms of size and aesthetics, looks kind of in between the Nest Mini, which was the really small one, and the Nest Audio, which was the bigger one. It is a round-looking speaker, but it's bigger than the older ones that you've seen in the past, like the Nest Mini and the Google Home Mini, I think was the original small one. So it's a little bit bigger than that, but it is a round shape. It's not like a cone or anything like that, cone or cylinder or anything like that. It's just a round speaker. And it's bringing some new tricks. It's got spatial audio. What they really want you to know is that it's got Gemini now instead of the Google Assistant. So that is, in my opinion, generally a good thing, but I know there's a lot of Gemini haters out there, but I think that Gemini is a really nice AI assistant, and I think it works really well. It's obviously meant to be more conversational with you, but you can still do all of the stuff that you've always done with pretty much any of the other smart speakers that are out there. In terms of audio, people say it generally sounds pretty good. It does have some bass. It is spatial. It does offer spatial audio, and it is a speaker that is meant to project audio in all directions. It is not a directional speaker. It will project in all directions from its round frame. It also, they're finally doing this correctly, can be paired directly with the Google TV streamer. And if you have two of them, you can combine them with the Google TV streamer in a stereo pair. So if you've got a Google TV streamer as the primary device that's hooked up to your television, and the only thing you've been using to listen to sound from your television has been the terrible TV speakers, well, this is an option that's probably better than the speakers that are built into your TV. I haven't heard one of these. I can almost guarantee that these will sound better than pretty much any TV speaker that's out there. So you can do that with these, and it will technically give you spatial audio from those speakers also. Is it going to compare to a $1,000 sound bar that has 11 speakers inside of it, and some are pointing up and some are pointing different directions and all of that? No. Is it going to compare to a 3.1 setup that has a subwoofer? No, because it doesn't have a subwoofer. But will it be better than your TV speakers? Almost definitely. The one thing that I wonder about, though, is what if you have any other device plugged into your television? If you've got an Xbox or a Switch or a PlayStation or something like that plugged into the TV, I don't think that audio will reverse its way through all of the HDMI channels to end up coming from your Google TV streamer to your Google Home speakers. That's probably not going to work. If you have any other devices hooked up to your TV, they're probably still going to project their audio out of your TV speaker. But if you're just trying to set up like a guest room with some better audio and the only thing you've got in there is a Google TV streamer, then this would actually work really well in a situation like that where you've got a smaller room and all of that. Because it's a newer Google Home device, it also works as a Matter hub. So if this is a smart home thing, so if you are wanting to get into the smart home ecosystem and you don't have anything that does Matter, well, this does. And if you can excuse me to nerd out a little bit on this, it's not just Matter with Wi-Fi. It does have a Thread radio in it. So it's not just Wi-Fi. And it'll work as a Thread border router or a Matter border router. So it can serve as essentially the hub of your Matter-based smart home, whether it's based on Thread or Wi-Fi signals. So that is also a nice thing to have in there. The Google TV streamer has that too. This is something that Google is doing with a lot of their devices. So the new device, it's out now. It does come in multiple colors, as Google has been doing with a lot of devices lately. There's a nice sage green, there's a red color, and there's, of course, gray and like an off-white color. And it's available now for $99. And frankly, that price seems a little bit refreshing. A few years ago, that would have seemed a little expensive to me, but in 2026, when literally the rest of the show we're going to be talking about how expensive devices are, $99 for a brand new smart speaker sounds just about right to me. Now, with them announcing a new speaker, there is another sort of downside, and that is that they are discontinuing the Nest Mini and the Nest Audio speakers that I mentioned at the beginning of this. But that makes sense. Like, they don't want to have those products anymore. It's different branding. So those will soon disappear from store shelves around the world. And this will be your only option for a Google smart speaker. All right. So let's jump to video news. And this is where everything starts going downhill. Apple, I think most people probably know this by now, but Apple announced the prices of almost everything they make are going up, and that was to be expected. And so there was a lot of talk about Macs and MacBooks and iPads and other devices, and we expected all of those to go up, but they're not the only devices that went up. If you've been thinking it's time to get another Apple TV for your house or to update or upgrade from an old Apple TV, well, those are getting more expensive too. There are two versions of the Apple TV 4K. One that has 64 gigs of storage and it's Wi-Fi only, and one that has 128 gigs of storage and has an Ethernet port. And they're both getting a lot more expensive. The just Wi-Fi model with less storage was previously $129, which already made it one of the most expensive video streaming devices that you could buy. Well, the low-end one is now $200, going up $80. That's a ton. And then the higher-end one with more storage and the Ethernet port, which used to be $150, is now $250. Wow, that's a lot. But I'm still not sure that that's even the most shocking price that we're going to talk about this episode. So stick around. We've got more and more bad news. It's not entirely bad, but in terms of pricing, pretty much everything else that we're going to talk about is bad news. Okay, so that's it for the video side. Apple TVs are more expensive. Let's jump to gaming, where things are a mix. Let's say a mix, because on the more exciting end of things, Valve has finally announced the Steam Machine. It's actually coming out very soon. They have allowed reviewers to get their hands on it and review them, and they've given us pricing for all of these. So before we get to the price, let's talk about what the reviewers are saying. There are a lot of good things here. It works really well as a desktop experience if you want that, but obviously it's really designed more to be a console-like gaming experience, and it does that extremely well. It's got HDMI 2.1 that can control your TV, so if you turn it on, it turns your TV on, things like that, and it boots right into an experience that's designed to be operated from your couch with a controller, like we expect from things like a PlayStation, an Xbox, and a Nintendo Switch. It's super quiet. In fact, it's even quieter than an Xbox and the PS5. So that's a really nice thing to have in your living room. But the performance isn't the greatest. Now, before we dip into that, I do think it's worth saying that, like a lot of the reviewers have said, you do actually get a really console-like experience when it comes to playing games on this thing. If you don't want to go in and tweak a million settings and turn on and off all of these different anti-aliasing settings and frame generation and upscaling and all of that craziness, so many games will just work really well right out of the box without you touching anything. And for those of you looking for a more console-like experience, that is music to your ears. So that works really well. But in terms of the performance, this is not going to blow your socks off. When they first announced this, they said, this machine, using some of the upscaling and frame generation and all of that, this will run many games in 4K at 60 frames per second. In reality, that's not quite so realistic. In fact, it's gotten to the point where they've removed the 4K 60 claim from the website. In reality, this thing works really well as a 1080p gaming device. And that's not bad. Frankly, there's a lot of console games that actually natively render at 1080p and they just get upscaled. So that's not the worst thing ever. But when you actually look at the performance of this machine and the frame rates that you're getting out of it compared to run-of-the-mill gaming PCs with standard off-the-shelf hardware, a lot of times we're actually seeing frame rates that are lower than a PC with like an RTX 4060 GPU. We absolutely didn't expect it to live up to like a machine with a 4090 or probably not even a 4080. But to see a lot of these numbers end up lower than what you'd see on a machine with a 4060, I think is a little bit disappointing. And I think some of that comes down to, you guessed it, RAM. So this thing has 16 gigs of system RAM, but it only has 8 gigs of video RAM. And even at 1080p, some games are shipping their games with enormous textures in them. And that can even start to become a problem on a machine that only has 8 gigs of video RAM. So I'm not going to get into all of the numbers on like, how many frames per second does it run Cyberpunk 2077 with ray tracing on? And like, if you want that information, it's all out there, but that doesn't make for good podcast content. So let's talk about what this thing is actually going to cost you and how you can get this. Because if you want this, you can theoretically get it. So how much? Well, there's basically two options. You can get the base model, which only has 512 gigs of storage, but it is technically replaceable and upgradable, and it does have a micro SD card slot in it. And the micro SD card slot is actually kind of awesome. Like if you have a Steam Deck and you've got a bunch of games on the micro SD card in your Steam Deck, you can pop it out, stick it in your Steam machine, and it just automatically recognizes all of the games. So that is a nice user experience. But even micro SD cards are getting expensive. So 512 gig machine, the only difference between these models is the size of the storage. And so the base is 512. What does that cost you? Well, the price that everybody else on the internet is telling you is $1,049. But I think that that's being, frankly, dishonest when all of the headlines say Steam Machine starts at $1,049. That's true to an extent, but it's only true if you don't want to buy it with a controller. And when we are marketing this thing as essentially a video game console, how many of you have ever bought a video game console that didn't include a controller? I'll wait. Right, none of you, because no one has ever sold a video game console that didn't include a controller. Now, do you have to have the controller that comes with the Steam Machine? No, you don't. You can hook up pretty much any Bluetooth controller you want to this thing, and it will work. But it's a video game console meant to be plugged into a TV and played from your couch. It should include the controller. So they will sell it to you with a controller, but if you do that, they are going to charge you $1,128. So it's really $1,128 in my mind. It's not $1,049, it's $1,128. Now, if you're looking at that and going, Josh, 512 gigs of storage is a joke in a video game console. One, I would agree with you. Two, I would have to say, well, good news, there is another option. There's one with 2 terabytes of storage, which sounds like a great number to me until you look at the price, because storage is ridiculously expensive, just like RAM. So the 2 terabyte version of the Steam Machine is $1,349. So you're paying an additional $300 to get that 2 terabyte model instead of the 512 gig model. And oh yeah, that price doesn't include a controller either. So let's be honest and say that the 2 terabyte version actually cost $1,428. That's a lot. Maybe you still want this, and there's a lot of reasons to still want it, I suppose. And this controller is really cool. How can you get it? Well, that's tricky because they're basically doing a randomized lottery system because they're saying to prevent scalpers from eating up the supply. But I think that it's also maybe the bigger reason behind this is there just isn't that much supply. And I think my guess would be the real reason behind the limited supply is because they don't expect to sell very many of these. Because who's dropping $1,500 on a machine that can't even play games at the performance greater than an RTX 4060? So here's my thought. And this is despite the fact that we're going to talk about some of these consoles also going up in price later. If you just want a really good video game console experience, buy a console. Buy a PlayStation 5, buy an Xbox Series X or S, buy a Nintendo Switch 2. All of them cost less than the Steam machine, and the PlayStation and the Xbox run games at way higher performance. You will actually get 4K 60 on a lot of games. You'll get 4K 120 on some games. It will just be a higher fidelity experience on an Xbox or a PS5. Do you have the same library as Steam? No, you don't. But the games play better and they look better, and that all seems pretty great to me. So I just don't see this doing well, and it's not entirely Valve's fault. Like, they just really, like, it's the economy, right? Like, they just had the misfortune of releasing this right as the economy for RAM and storage has gone berserk, and they're going to suffer for that, unfortunately. Okay, let's talk about another device. This one is also a mix of good news and bad news. On the last episode, we talked about some devices that were showing up at Computex using Intel's new processor, the Arc G3. And that's their processor built specifically for gaming handhelds. And one of those handhelds is now available, and they've landed in reviewers' hands, and we know all about it now. And one of them is the MSI Claw 8EX AI Plus. And, well, it seems like pretty much everything that Intel said about this processor was pretty much true. This thing rocks. The device itself looks great. It's got an 8-inch, it's only IPS, but it's still a nice looking screen, 1920 by 1200 resolution, and that display goes up to 120 hertz with VRR. So, I mean, really the only thing you're missing out on is OLED, and I know that that's kind of a big deal, but man, the rest of that is exactly what you're looking for. The VRR range goes from 48 up to 120 hertz. Love that. This thing comes with 32 gigs of RAM. The controller design looks amazing. Like, it looks and apparently feels a lot like an Xbox controller, which is a great thing. I think the Xbox controller feels fantastic. It has Hall effect sticks and triggers. That's awesome. You're not going to have to worry about stick drift. You're going to get really precise controls out of that. It has Bluetooth 6 with Bluetooth LE audio. So if you've got compatible earbuds, you can pair those up to this thing and have no noticeable audio lag, which is not what you would say from most Bluetooth earbuds connected to a random handheld. And so what about the performance? The performance is really, really good. In some benchmarks, we're seeing a 67% increase in performance over the AMD Ryzen Z2 Extreme. Now, is that a completely fair comparison? Maybe not, considering the Ryzen Z2 Extreme is a year and a half old at this point, but AMD didn't release a new one this year. So that's the newest one to compare it to. And that's the chip that's in the other leading competitors like the ROG Xbox Ally X. And it beats the Xbox Ally X in pretty much all of the benchmarks. So this thing looks great. It looks like it feels great. It has all of the features you're looking for, unless you are an absolute like OLED snob and you won't buy anything that doesn't have an OLED. It works great as a like a mini PC. It's got 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports on it. It's a great and powerful and efficient computer. And it is the next level of chips that we've been looking to that might actually supplant the Ryzen Z2 Extreme that I kind of figured we just weren't going to get this year. And Intel kind of came out of nowhere and surprised everybody by saying, no, actually, guys, I know you've been writing us off forever on mobile chips, but we've got one and you should take us seriously. Yeah, they hit the ball out of the park with these Arc G3 chipsets. So that's all the good news. The bad news, of course, is the price. $1,800 is what it's going to cost for you to get an MSI Claw 8EX AI Plus. Oh, man. So like you're finally getting what really truly feels potentially like the next generation of gaming handheld, but it's the cost of a PlayStation and an Xbox and a Switch combined. And again, it's not entirely their fault. It's the cost of all of these components. You've got 32 gigs of RAM in there. You've got expensive storage in there. It's going to cost a lot of money. And there's just not a lot that any of these manufacturers can do about that. If you thought the show was going to end here with that being the last news about expensive hardware, well, unfortunately, you're mistaken, because we've got another one. It's the Xbox. Yep, it's their turn again. It really wasn't that long ago that they last increased the price of the Xbox. It was just last year, and they're back at it. At least this time, you've got a little bit of time to run to the store before these prices go up, because they don't actually hit until August 1st, so you've got a month. But these ones hurt. These ones hurt a lot for an Xbox fan like me. So let's start with the Xbox Series S. This is the lower spec one, the 512 gig model. This was the one that, when it launched, was $300. It's currently $350, but it's going up to $450. If you want the 1 terabyte version of the Series S, that's going from $400 to $550. Yes, that is more expensive than what the Series X launched at. Yep. If you want a Series X, there are 2 versions of that. A 1 terabyte version with no Blu-ray drive and a 1 terabyte version with a Blu-ray drive. If you don't care about the physical drive, you can currently get that for $550, but that's going up by $150 to $700 for an Xbox Series X without a drive. And the 1 terabyte Series X with the Blu-ray drive is going from $600 to $750. So basically, the Xbox Series X that I bought on launch day in 2020, 5.5 years ago, for $500, now cost $750. And if you were like, wait, what about the 2 terabyte one? What did that go up to? It didn't. They just decided to discontinue it because who was going to pay for it? And maybe they honestly just couldn't get much supply of 2 terabyte drives. Who knows? But they're just not going to sell it because who would buy it at these prices? I'm really concerned about what is happening in the gaming industry. We're still going to hold off on talking about everything that is about to likely happen with the Xbox game studios. We're probably about to see multiple studios closed and hundreds, if not thousands, of people laid off. But even without that, we know that the game development industry has been struggling mightily over the last few years with thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people laid off in that industry over the last couple of years. As the cost of game development continues to skyrocket, and now we continue to see the cost of video game hardware continue to skyrocket. And we're ending up in this place where we can't make games because they're too expensive to make, and no one can buy them because no one can afford the hardware that these games would run on. That seems like an existential crisis for the video game industry, and I don't know how we get out of it. And I do want to point out that, as the resident Microsoft fanboy on this show, Microsoft, they're being very much negatively impacted by a lot of this, but they're also the cause of they're part of the cause of a lot of this, because all of the hardware prices that we're seeing are being impacted by all of these companies trying to build data centers. And Microsoft is one of those companies that's trying to build all of these data centers. And so they're gobbling up all of the RAM and the storage for their data centers also, and it's impacting their own consumer hardware in addition to everybody else's. But it's not just Microsoft. Like, all of these big tech companies are building tons of data centers. It's not just Microsoft. It's basically all of them. Microsoft's just in that weird spot where one part of the company is basically actively destroying another part of that company. And with Microsoft feeling both the hardware crunch and the software crunch of this, I don't know how they move forward out of this. It's just a really bad time to have to be working in the video game space, or to even just be a gamer. Like, I love my Xbox and I'm still going to play it like crazy, but if that thing breaks, am I going to go drop $750 for a replacement? Boy, I don't know. That's a lot of friggin' money for an almost 6-year-old video game console. But at the same time, I don't want them to release a new one. We don't need new video game consoles right now. So don't release a PlayStation 6 and whatever the next Xbox is going to be called, because we don't need them right now. And the economy can't take it with how expensive these things would cost. If a new PlayStation and Xbox were to come out this year, they would for sure be at least $1,000, probably more than that. Look at what we just talked about with the Steam Machine. The Steam Machine is less performant than both of those consoles, and the next ones will be more performant than these ones. So what would they cost? $1,500? I have zero interest in dropping $1,500 on a brand new Xbox. So hold off. Wait until this hardware crisis comes to an end, and then let's talk about new devices, because this is just getting out of hand. And let me throw this other reminder out there for all of you. This isn't just an Xbox problem. We just talked about PlayStation increases. We just, before that, talked about Nintendo Switch price increases. I wouldn't be surprised if we see an increase from one or both of them again this year. And if not, it will probably happen again within the next calendar year, unless something dramatic happens with the RAM and storage industry. This is just going to continue to get further and further out of control. Okay, that's a lot of really bad news. Let's wrap up the news segment with that and get on to something, I guess, cheerier. Let's talk about what's been going on in our entertainment centers. And for me, it still hasn't been a ton because there's been so much going on in my life. The best thing, though, is playing Forza Horizon 5. There are other video games out there. None of them matter. I'm just playing so much Forza Horizon 5. I love that game. Even on my craziest days, I like to head on over to my Xbox and grab that controller and play a half an hour of Forza Horizon. I keep saying 5. It's Forza Horizon 6. Before I go to bed. That is how I'm ending most of my days, and I love it. I also saw a couple of movies in the last couple of weeks. One of them we went to see in the theaters. ever since the Super Bowl, I've been excited about the new Steven Spielberg movie called Disclosure Day. I kind of intentionally didn't go out and seek out a bunch of extra trailers and read a whole lot of things about it. It just looked really cool in the very first trailer, and I thought, that's enough for me. It looks cool, and it's being made by Steven Spielberg. I bet it's going to be really good. And so we went and saw it. And I think that this movie was made for people like me. I think it was made for elder millennials, maybe younger Gen X folks who grew up loving Steven Spielberg movies in the 80s and many other 80s movies, because this feels like an 80s movie in so many ways. It is so optimistic. It is so unrealistic when it comes to the the conflict in a movie. It just feels like an 80s movie. And in some ways, that's a great thing. Like, we probably need more of that right now. We need some movies that you're probably going to walk out feeling a little bit happier, or at least a little bit less like everything is falling to pieces. And that is what this movie does, but I wasn't expecting it. And I think that it's so different from movies that we've been watching over the last 20 years that it just didn't feel right. Like, I think I would have liked this movie more if I had gone into it knowing, yeah, this is Spielberg trying to bring us back to what movies felt like in the 80s. But I wasn't prepared for it. And so it didn't quite hit the way that I had hoped it would. It's a good movie. I do recommend it. And the acting is phenomenal. It's a good, entertaining movie. And it's worth seeing in the theaters too, if it's still in theaters at this point. It just wasn't quite what I had expected. We also watched another movie at home, and this one I absolutely loved. We watched Knives Out. I've heard of these movies. I've only ever heard good things about them. All-star cast. We decided to put that on over the weekend, and we all loved it. It was so good, so fun, so like the murder mystery aspect of this, the detective aspect of this was so well done. It was entertaining in all the right ways. I just loved this movie. And so now we're going to watch the other two movies in the Knives Out trilogy, or the Benoit Blanc trilogy, or whatever we're calling this whole series. But it was an absolute blast. If you have not seen Knives Out, it's worth seeking out. I can't remember what service it's on. It's on one that we don't subscribe to, but it was also on Richard's Plex server. So that's how I watched it. And we're going to be watching the other two. I think the other two are still on Netflix. And then in terms of TV and I honestly don't think I watched any TV other than Gia always having young Sheldon on. Books, I just started a new one called The Authenticity Project that is for my book club that I absolutely love. But I've only just begun the book, so I'm not going to say much about that just yet. I will on the next episode. And, well, that's pretty much going to do it for this episode. So if you'd like to get a hold of us, give us any feedback on topics that you heard about tonight, ask questions, tell us how insane this system is and how we're going to get out of these hardware price crunch, you can do that in a lot of different ways. All of our contact information is in our show notes, which you can find on the website at www.thedigitalmediazone.com. But we're on socials. Richard is at Richard Gunther on Mastodon. He is richardgunther.com on Blue Sky. I'm Josh Pollard on Blue Sky and Twitter, but I prefer Blue Sky. And reach out to us. We would love to chat with you more. You can also email us, entertainment20@thedigitalmediazone.com. But that's going to do it for episode 713. I'm Josh Pollard. Thanks for listening to Entertainment 2.0. Adios.